yeah, today webinar will speak about the Compiler Qualification Kit. This is one of our tasking products, and this cover basically the topic of certifying the tool chain against ISO 26262 standard, and not only ISO 26262 standard, but we will see other standards as well during the presentation. So at the beginning, a bit of motivation. So for every OEM and for every supplier as well, they need and they must to comply to the standards that they are working according to. So if the OEM or if the supplier is working in the automotive space, so it means they have to comply to ISO 26262. For the railway, they have to comply to EN 50128. And if the supplier or the OEM, they are working in the agricultural machinery, so they have to comply to ISO 25119. And basically, the Compiler Qualification Kit could help you to qualify your tool chain according to all these standards. And when it comes to the functional safety, there is a very known trend and mainstream in terms of functional safety at the moment. So it moves basically from special and specific requirements to the mainstream, and it happens as the number of complex applications that run on the hardware increase with the time. And basically for the Compiler Qualification Kit, it provides basically evidences that says, okay, the tool chain is can be used and could be qualified according to all the criteria that are listed into the standard that the OEM try to comply against. And it's always a big issue or challenging when it comes to development and safety at the same time, because the functional safety, it requires special tools and support, and at the same time it can increase the development and cost time. And the main motive for the OEMs and for the suppliers to comply or to qualify against the standard is a legal accountability. So once the OEM or once the supplier complies to the standard, so the legal accountability is waived away from the OEM or from the software supplier. I would like to show you at the beginning kind of overview about the safety ecosystem by tasking. So it basically provides different components and different products that solve different issues according to the safety standards. So you will find here from the left the safety checker. So the safety checker is static analysis tool. It's ASIL aware, and this achieves the ISO 26262 principle, which is called freedom from interference. We already covered one webinar about this, so if you'd like to get more information about this tool, you could check the previous webinar series. And we are providing as well the tasking compiler. The tasking compiler is ASPICE level 2 compliant, and this definitely could be helpful for you to certify against ISO 26262. And we are providing as well a static analysis tool to verify the compliance to Measure C rules and Cert C as well. And today's topic will cover the Compiler Qualification Kit, which is provide guidance to comply against ISO 26262. And the last part from this ecosystem is the tasking services. And the tasking services, the customers decided to go for tasking services if basically the use case from the customer side is not 100% like what's mentioned in our safety manual that's listed in the Compiler Qualification Kit. So as you can see here, different components that solve different challenges for our OEMs, for our suppliers, and today's presentation will cover only the part of the Compiler Qualification Kit. So as you can see here, this is the ISO 26262 standard. So you will find some components that concerned about the hardware level, some different components that cover the software level, and some supporting processes. But for the Tasking Compiler Qualification Kit, it covers this part in as section number 8, which is called confidence in the use of the software tool. So that means it provides evidences that the tool chains that you already used to compile and to generate the executables could be used and is qualified according to ISO 26262. For the flow from the qualification, so you will find here it's a 5-step flow. The first step, it's called prerequisites and supporting info, and this is basically where the documents are gathered from the vendor provider, which is tasking, and from the customer side as well. So it's kind of document gathering step, and after that you will jump to the next step, which is the tool classification process. And this tool classification process, it's divided into 2 phases basically. So the confidence level, so the customer has to according to his development environment, he has to define the confidence level in the tool set, and after that he has to provide evidences according to the confidence level and the ASIL level that they are looking to achieve to. And the 4th step here is the confirmation review. And for the confirmation review, it cover and it makes a review for all the decisions that are made in the previous 2 stages, which is the confidence level and the evidences that are provided. And after that, the customer has to create the deliverables that will be handed to the authority entity, like TÜV, for example. And this kind of reports that the customer need to create as the end of this workflow. So we'll go in a bit deeper in each phase. So the first phase is the prerequisites and the supporting info. And in this phase, documents are gathered. So from tasking side or from the compiler vendor side, we are providing the toolset user manual, and we will provide as well a predetermined maximum level. And we will provide tool constraints when it comes to developing a safety-related development. So definitely there are toolset constraints, and you will get all these toolset constraints, and you have to be aware about this. And we will provide at last the known malfunctions and the mitigations that already discovered by our testing team and discovered as well from our customers. So all these are the prerequisite documents and requirements that needs to be available from the tasking side. And from our customer side or from the OEM side, so they definitely need to provide a safety plan, and they need to provide the configuration of the software tool and the use cases of the software tool and the environment, the general environment where this software tool is used. And one important point here as well is to define the maximum ASIL level that the OEM is planning to reach to. So once all these documents and once all these configurations are in place, so this first step is achieved, and one can go to the next level, which is the tool classification process. And inside this tool classification process, the customer need to define the confidence level, and the confidence level is determined based on the customer verification and validation process. So the customer has to go through his validation and verification process in order to define his confidence level. And once the customer decided for the confidence level, and once he decided as well which ASIL level he is targeting, if it's ASIL A, B, C, or D. So once all these 2 parameters are determined, so based on these 2 factors, the customer need to decide on the qualification method. And you can see here in this graph, the Compiler Qualification Kit support 2 qualification methods. So there is one classification method that's called a user qualification method, a validation of the software tool, and the second qualification method, it's called evaluation of the tool development process. And based on the previous stage, which is the prerequisite and the supporting info, and based on the confidence level and the ASIL level that the customer is targeting, he needs to go either to the evaluation of the tool development process qualification method, or the validation of the software tool as qualification method. So let's go maybe through one route, for example. So once all the documents and all the configurations are in place, the customer need to check and ask himself if the tool malfunction exists or not, and if there is no malfunction in the tool chain that the customer use, so no tool qualification is required and no more work is required from the customer side. But this is basically kind of theory, but if one goes to the practical life, so the customer will find tool malfunction errors. And once there is a tool malfunctions error in the tool chain, the customer need to ask himself about the confidence that these malfunctions are detected and mitigated. And if the confidence level is high, so as well, no more qualification effort is needed. But if the confidence is low or medium, so more work from the customer need to be done. And this is decided based on the ASIL level that he is targeting. So let's assume, for example, if the confidence level is medium, and if the customer, for example, developing a very high critical safety critical application like ASIL-D, so in this case the customer need to use the qualification method that's called validation of the software tool. But if the confidence, for example, is low, and the customer is developing a relatively lower safety application like ASIL-A or B, so in this case, the customer need to jump to the qualification method that's called evaluation of the tool development process. So this is basically the flow where and how the customer decided on which user qualification method that needs to be used during the qualification process. And once the qualification method is defined, then the customer need to provide evidences that the software tool is fit and can be worked according to the intended purposes. So as you can see here, these are the two qualification methods that are supported by the Compiler Qualification Kit. So if the user decided for the first qualification method, which is called evaluation of the tool development process, from the vendor side, we will provide evidences that the compiler and the linker and the whole tool chain that the customer use is developed and complied according to ASPICE level 2. And from the customer side, no more work is needed at this point. And if the customer decided to the other qualification method, which is the validation of the software tool, so in this case, we will provide a list of mail functions, and we will provide evidences that all these mail functions are analyzed and mitigations for such mail functions are available and could be deployed. And then the next question that the customer need to ask himself is if the user case, if the customer user case match exactly what's mentioned inside the safety manual that's provided from tasking or not. And this depends on basically how the customer develop the code. So for example, if the customer is developing according to ISO-C and he is generating the binaries without writing any assembly by hand, or the customer use exactly the tool option or the compiler options that are mentioned in the safety manual. So in this case, the customer doesn't need to do more work because it's exactly what's mentioned in the safety manual, and he will jump to the next phase, which is the confirmation review. But if the customer, for example, makes some manual changes in the startup code that's generated, or he put some inline assembly, or he put a handicrafted assembly inside the generated assembly, or even he's trying to use a non-ISO-C language extension. So in this case, the customer needs maybe to contact tasking to provide more support in this case, because we need to qualify the tool according to this particular use case. And then we will jump to the next phase, which is the confirmation review. So in this phase, which is a confirmation review, the customer need to make sure that all the right decisions in terms of evidences and in terms of the qualification methods that the customer decided for are correct and fit, and the workflow basically is working as expected. And this step is function of the ASIL level that the customer is targeting. So if the customer is developing ASIL-A applications, so no more work is needed in this case, and he will the customer need to go for the first the next phase, which is the deliverables phase. But if the customer is developing applications that are ASIL-B or more, so in this case, the customer needs to do more work, and in this case, he needs to review that the confidence level that the customer select is correct, and the qualification method that the customer decided for is correct. And these are the two parameters that needs to be checked during this phase of the workflow. And after the customer makes sure all these decisions are correct and the right decisions are taken, he needs to jump to the next phase, which is the deliverables. And for the deliverables, this is the last part or the last phase of the qualification flow. And in this deliverables, the customer creates reports that will be delivered to the authorization entity. And this is as well function of the ASIL level. So if the customer is developing ASIL or targeting ASIL-A, so the customer need to create some reports that's called software tool criteria report. And this is basically the output from the qualification flow. And if the customer is targeting ASIL-B, C, or D applications, so in this case, the customer need to create a different report, which is called software tool qualification report. And this is as well the output in this case, and this will be sent to the authorization entity. Just to give you an idea about what are the contents of the compiler qualification kit. So inside the compiler qualification kit, it consists of three main components. So the first part of this compiler qualification kit is the safety manual, and inside the safety manual, it describes basically how to configure the tool chain if you are developing a safety-related applications. And this is will be covered totally in the safety manual. And the second part of the compiler qualification kit is the defects database. And in this defects database, you will find all the malfunctions that already discovered by our testing team and reported by our customers as well. And I believe this will give good support for our customers, because once some malfunction already detected, so you don't need to invest more time yourself to solve this malfunction, because this could be solved by our team, and you will save more time for this. I'd like maybe to show you this database. So you will find it. It's web-based database. So here you could see all the issues are sorted according to the architectures that you are developing according to. So there's like ARM, there is C166, and there is Power Architecture, Renaissance, and Tricore. So it depends on what architectures that you are using. You could go to the proper one that fits in your case. So I will log in. And after I logged in, I maybe select one of the Tricore versions here, and you could see here all these are the open issues that are reported by our customers and by our testing team. And once you go maybe to one of the issues, so you could see here the type and status and which component in the tool chain that is this issue is affected, and the SIL level as well. You could see it here. You could see detailed description about the problem. And what's interesting as well is you could see as well the mitigation for such malfunctions. So this provides great support for the customers, because he doesn't need basically to dig deeper in the mail function himself and check how this mitigation could be happen once this is provided by tasking. So this is basically the second part of the compiler qualification kit. The third part of the kit is the scripts and instructions. Once you decided to use the qualification method, that's called validation of the software tool. So this is a bit tricky qualification method, I would say, and we are supporting scripts and the instructions to execute the validation of the software tool qualification method. So these are basically the three parts of the compiler qualification kit. I would like maybe to highlight a bit about the tasking services as well. So as I mentioned, the customer could goes to the tasking services once his use case doesn't match 100% what's already mentioned in the safety manual that existed in the compiler qualification kit. And in this case, the customer has two options. So either he could use the tasking services, so he could seek more support from the tasking side, or he could use or buy a compiler test suite himself and do the whole qualification himself. But in tasking, we doesn't recommend this because the customer need to do lots of investments in the compiler test suite itself, and he need to set up a test infrastructure, and he need to get the proper resources and the proper training in order to do such qualification. That's why the customers always go to the tasking services. So this is basically the last part from the webinar. So here I would like as well to highlight basically the different components or different products that we're having or are providing in tasking. So we are providing the compiler for different architectures, and this compiler it's developed, as I mentioned in the presentation, according to ASPICE level 2, and this will be a very important point for the OEMs and for the suppliers to qualify the tool chain itself. We are providing as well the embedded profiler, and for this embedded profiler, it's a tool that could discover the bottlenecks into your software while it's running on the hardware, so it provides a better optimization for your software. The last product that we're having is the LabAC performance libraries, and this is basically a mathematical library that helps when you are developing ADAS applications. And the fourth one is the embedded debugger to debug the normal workflow of your applications. And from the safety side, we are offering the safety checker that achieves the freedom from interference principle, which is very important topic in the ISO 26262. And for the last component that we already covered during this webinar is the compiler qualification kit that helps you to qualify the tool chain against ISO 26262. So this is the ecosystem or the different products that we're offering in order to overcome different challenges when you are developing multi-core safety-related applications.